Muscatine. Hope your Wednesday's starting off well. You're halfway through the week.
Almost.
Hopefully if your weekend's on Friday and started on Monday. I guess if it started any other time, you probably aren't. Couple quick things. I have to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Munster Public Library. We got to swing down there yesterday right after the show. I don't know if you were watching yesterday, you probably saw the tremors that happened. And they had these amazing animatronic dinosaurs down there. I don't know how many people were there. There were kids everywhere. There were, 10, 12-foot dinosaurs roaming around downtown Muscatine. And we did a little video. If you want to see what it was, go check out Facebook, YouTube. Thad Burkhamper stopped by in his Jurassic Park. What does he call that? It's a, no, I know it's a Jeep, Chris. Yeah, it's like a rescue vehicle, something. I don't know. Whatever. His Jeep that he painted up to look like one of the ones from Jurassic Park. It looks awesome. He stopped down. We had quite a bit of fun with it. So again, as I say, almost every day, if you think there's nothing going on in Muscatine, you're nuts. Tonight, don't forget we have Dr. Saga's dementia series. Tonight's topic is toxins. Starts at 5:30 out at the Muscatine Community School District building. Of course, we'll be broadcasting it on all of our social channels, plus PCTV Channel 3 on MPW. So don't forget those. And tomorrow night we have girls softball starting at 5 o'clock, I believe. I think it's a doubleheader. Don't remember off the top of my head. Check the schedule, you'll see. With that, I have what is always a weirdly fascinating topic for me. I have Kim from SHIIP here with me. And if you would, real quick, for those that don't know you and SHIIP, if you could just kind of give them a quick overview of who you are and kind of what SHIIP does in general.
Okay. My name's Kim Thompson, and I am a volunteer for the SHIIP organization. SHIIP is a nationwide program that helps people with Medicare in every phase of Medicare, whether they're getting ready to start taking Medicare and need to know where to go, what to do, what kind of information to pull together, or if they're in Medicare already and they have questions about bills that they're receiving, or they suspect fraud, or they need to take a look at their Part D plans, which is their drug plan, on an annual basis during the open enrollment time. Open enrollment is October 15th to December 7th. This is a time when people can change their drug insurance or their Medicare Advantage plans. It's a very busy time for us, but during the rest of the year, it's a much more relaxed atmosphere, which
I
is
would
nice.
think. It's kind of like taxes,
Yeah.
because I remember from my time in insurance, we didn't do a lot in the healthcare side. I mean, we did some, but that open enrollment period is it's almost like the wild, wild west in a weird sort of way, because you have, you have a lot of insurance companies who make or break their years in those, was it about 8 weeks or so?
Yeah, about 7.
7, okay. So they're out doing all this promotion, they're doing all these commercials, print ads, direct mail. Do you have a Part D? Is your Part D right? Save money on this. Don't go in the donut hole. Eat your donut hole. Have donuts for Christmas. The ads you see are crazy. And if you don't know exactly what all of it is,
Right.
it can get really confusing really quickly.
Right.
Because some of them will say, well, we've got, gym memberships that we throw in, and this, silver sneakers, but does that cover your Part B? There's just all these nuances to it that if you don't know the exact formulas you need to use
Right.
to calculate what it's going to cost you, things may sound good,
Right.
but then you can get nipped in the rear really quickly.
Right.
If you don't pick the right ones.
Right, right. And picking the right one is kind of, it's a little bit of guesswork. Because none of us has a crystal ball to know what our health situation is going to be like in the future. And that's what I think is most frustrating for people when they come in. they've worked most of their lives, or their spouse has worked most of their life, and their insurance has been provided by an employer. They maybe get one or two choices of what insurance package they're going to go with. And now they're retiring, they've reached age 65, or they're retiring, and they've got hundreds of companies to take a look at, and it is very overwhelming.
Well, and the one thing that I kind of feels like this fundamental problem, and this is going to be a little bit philosophical, folks, humor me for a moment, is, going back to like my insurance licensing test, right? The definition of insurance is the transfer of risk, right? So think of it, the most fundamental way of thinking about it is your car, right? You buy liability insurance in case you happen to hit somebody else.
Right.
And you're transferring that risk that you might hit somebody else to the insurance company for a premium. That's like the exact definition of, well, maybe not exact, but paraphrase of what insurance is, right? And I was, we spent a lot of time up at the University of Iowa and working with them through the leadership councils and stuff like that. And what people want and are used to in the healthcare arena is really more like prepaid healthcare, right? Because, technically, if it's going to be insurance, you have to not know whether it's going to happen or not. It has to be a risk, right? And like you just said, you don't know what's going to happen next year. That's the risk part. But with a car, that's easy, right? I mean, you know how much you're going to drive, so you can estimate it based on that. But that's pretty simple, right? But with insurance for health, they want, and me too, like this isn't a they, like Medicare, like people want like your annual health checkups, right? They want that all bundled up and in. Well, technically, an annual health checkup, there's no risk. That needs to happen, right? So now when you want them to include that, now that's not really a transfer of risk. That's not really insurance. That's just prepaying your healthcare, right? And so I think that's where it gets really tough, is because, insurance companies, and I'm not sticking up for insurance companies per se with this, but like, it's not just about the transfer of risk. It's about how much, because we all know that preventative works, right? Getting your annual checkups makes you healthier. It saves everybody money. So yes, it does make sense for an insurance company to help you do that. But then it gets all messy, because then you start throwing in, we were talking just before the show, like silver sneakers and gym memberships and all this other stuff, and it gets blurry really, really quickly.
And most of those, when you see them throw in silver sneakers or a gym membership, or it's to sweeten the pot for the consumer. It's to make one company look like they were giving you more than another company is. A lot of things that people don't understand is, you've got parts A and B on Medicare, and then you choose whether you go with a Medicare Advantage plan, which is commonly known as Part C, or you go with an original supplement and the Part D. So you make that choice, but you have to understand it, particularly if you go with an original supplement. If you choose a Plan G, which is the most popular supplement right now, a G is a G is a G is a G. For whatever you do, medically, they have to provide the same thing. So, there's a wide discrepancy in what you pay for premiums, and depending on what you're looking for outside of just the medical, may influence what you choose.
And
that's
what you're willing to pay. And that's like, I remember, again, thinking back to my insurance days, I like to think I'm a fairly smart guy, and everybody at home, yes, peanut gallery, just keep your comments to yourselves. You don't need to flash Facebook and stuff like that. But I remember the first time I looked at the offerings, I was with Farm Bureau at the time, for the Blue Cross, and I looked at that and said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to, and it's because you have to really, and I was talking with Mr. Witecki about this, and I actually had a conversation with Mr. Krausar as well about how you calculate this stuff, right? And there are some things that you can know in advance. You know what drugs you take. And so you can pop them into a formulary, and you can figure out, okay, here's what the cost of it is with this, here's what the cost of it is with this, and here's what the premium is, and here's what the premium is here, and here's what your out-of-pocket will be. And from that aspect, it becomes a math problem, right? But the problem is, people aren't logical. Like, we all know that. We're not logical beings as much as we want to think we are.
Right.
And, Paul was telling me about a gentleman who, he did all the math, and he's like, I can save you $1,500 a year if you take, let's call it plan X,
Yeah.
over plan Y.
Right.
Well, the guy said, well, but I feel more comfortable with this one, so I'm going to take this one.
Yeah.
Even though there was no, what we would call logical reason.
Right.
And that's the healthcare world, right? And it's, and here's the thing: if it makes him more comfortable, and he's comfortable spending the extra $1,500, great. That's fine, right? But it's some tough decisions.
And I think sometimes in those situations where somebody stays with something that's more expensive for them, there's a fear of change.
Yeah, absolutely.
That people
Absolutely.
have to overcome. And particularly when you're looking at drug plans, it's not that difficult to change one drug plan to another drug plan. You know, so they shouldn't fear that. It gets more complicated if you're looking at changing supplements or you're looking at changing your Medicare Advantage plans, but for the drug plans, that's simple.
And I think, there's also a pharmacy function there. Like, where is your pharmacy on the list? Are they not on the list?
Are they preferred or not preferred?
Right. Are they, or can they become preferred if they want to be? Like, there's all this stuff, and you get a whole bunch of people who have a vested interest in what you choose trying to influence you.
Right.
You have pharmacies, which, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, the pharmacy is going to be able to tell you, for us to get you this and this, it's going to be easier if you have this one, right? But they don't know the premiums, right? And, or whoever, Brother Joe might see, one thing, but that's what I love about what SHIIP does is you guys kind of like pull it all together.
Right.
And the way I think of you guys in my head, and I don't know if this will help anybody else, but it's almost as if you were sitting in that person's seat and would say, okay, how would I make this decision?
Right.
And you go through all the logical progressions, right? And then you share that with them, and then you talk through it, right? Because again, there are some things like you may be more comfortable with X or Y or whatever.
Right.
And it's not like you guys have any financial interest in it. You're all volunteers, for crying out loud.
We're volunteers, and we are taught during our initial training that we have to remain objective. We can't tell a client what to do. We can't say this is the best program for you. All we can do is give them the information. They have to make up their own minds.
And that's, I think a lot of times people wish others could make that decision for them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't, and again, I can be this way. I don't want to have to make the decision, because then if it's wrong, I have to take the heat for it, right? Like, and so it's easier if you just say, well, you just tell me which one's the best. Because then if something doesn't go right, I can spend the next year witching about, that person that told me to do it. It was their fault, not mine. And, that also puts the volunteer in a tough position, and it puts the whole system in a tough position. Because the personal responsibility function here is huge, right? Like, you do have to understand your medical needs. You have to understand what it costs. You have to do that. Nobody else can do that for you. Right,
exactly. And we can't decide what's most important to you.
Right.
That person knows what it is, and they've got to put that into their equation when they're trying to make their decisions.
And admittedly, it is tough, especially, and I don't want to stereotype here, but like, as people get older, they can maybe not be as focused, maybe have a little tougher time with these complex situations that I'm going to say normal people, I don't mean that, but have a hard time with, right? And, I sit there and I think, okay, if, because my mom's rapidly approaching this vein, and she actually had an appointment with John last year when she retired. And, what would I want for my mom? Right? And, yes, and this is an instance where could I sit down and probably go through and figure out the math? I probably could.
Probably.
But it'd be the first time I've done it in 15, 18 years. Is there a decent chance I'm going to miss something? Probably.
It changes all the time.
I would rather have her go sit down with you or John or Mr. Krausar and get all that info. And because people can go with them, right? So I could go with her, but go get that information from Paul or John or you, come back, Mom, and we'll sit down and talk about it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
you don't have to make a decision, the appointment with you guys.
Right.
You know, go get them, have them do all the hard math, you know, have them show you which one's like the bottom line best number, you know, or we'll put them
Yep.
next to each other. And,
Right.
and then, Mom, you and I can sit down and talk about, okay, here's the facts, here are the things that you know you need, here's what you're comfortable with,
Right.
here's what you're used to,
Right.
make your decision. And
We see that a lot. We
Yeah.
see people that either bring in someone else with them to help them understand,
Mm-hmm.
help them remember everything they need to remember. Or they do we send documentation home with them. You know, go talk, talk
Mm-hmm. Yep,
this
I
over.
remember
think
seeing
about
what
this, and-
Mom brought. Yeah.
Yep, and so you can make an informed decision on which direction you want to go.
Yeah, and I think that is the big thing that I hope for everyone when they make decisions like this, or really any decision, whether it's just that you can make an informed decision,
Right.
Like, and feel like you are informed, right? Because we all get stuck making decisions that we don't want to have to make,
Right.
But the best you can hope for in those situations is at least feeling comfortable with knowing you had the information, and at least at the moment you made the decision, you understood it. Like,
Right.
you may not remember why you did it 6 months from now, but if you can just remember that, hey, you know what, I did sit down, I went through all the stuff we were supposed to, that was the decision we came to. Even so, if something doesn't go well 6 months from now, you can go, but we did the right thing then,
Right.
Because,
Right.
like you said, you can never predict what's going to happen, right?
Exactly.
So as people are looking at what's coming up over the next, say they're retiring first time, or maybe they're looking at new plans, or they're not comfortable with
They're
it,
turning 65.
turning 65, is there any big changes coming up this year that you know about, or is it pretty status quo?
For the 2024 year,
Yeah, for 2020, yeah. The
Not
one
that-
the open enrollment that'll be coming up here in a couple of months.
well, there's always going to be changes to the formularies.
Right,
Always.
right.
And there's always changes to new Medicare Advantage providers, within
Right.
the state. They move in and out, and just like they do with the supplements. But I don't know of anything that is come down legislatively.
Okay,
like
that's
last
more
year-
where I was going, yeah.
Last year, there was quite a bit. Like shingle shots are now covered for
Right.
Medicare, where you used to have to pay $158
Oh, that's awesome.
per shot, right?
That's probably why we see all the shingles advertisements, right?
Yeah, because
Because
Medicare
pays for them. You can always tell, and this is not a joke, this is just a piece of like critical thinking, right? Like, if all of a sudden you start seeing advertisements for something like a healthcare thing for somebody over 65, like
Right.
shingle shots, you can probably bet that means that
There's
Medicare
been
is
a
going to pay
change,
for.
right.
There's been a change. Medicare is going to pay for
Right.
it. So, because they know the dollars are there, so they can turn that into a part of their business, right? And
Medicare pays for flu shots, but they have for a long time.
Right.
So that's always been there.
how does I was curious, I never really thought about this. How did COVID work for that? And like, do they still cover COVID tests? Like, I don't even know.
I can't tell you that for sure, if they still
I
cover the
don't.
tests.
I mean,
or not.
obviously, I know it's not as big of a concern today
Right,
as it was over the
right.
last
I mean,
3
there
years.
was,
but-
because I saw something, there was a push, get the last free COVID test, so
Yeah.
they may be stopping that.
yeah.
but, I haven't read anything
Yeah.
to that effect. What else changed? Oh, insulin was a big change this past year.
What changed on that?
2023. Well, anybody that's on Medicare and gets a program that provides insulin, they are required, the provider is required not to charge any more than $35 a month.
Oh, right. I did
Insulin,
see that. Yep.
which-
Yeah,
that
it
was
was that
huge.
price. Yes. Yeah.
Because insulin is a big expense.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know several guys that like play racquetball with us and stuff that like they've got the magical devices
Right.
and on their phone, and it beeps if it's low, and they're constantly monitoring that,
Right.
and they're not the only ones. It's obviously a big
Yep.
thing.
Exactly.
So if somebody's sitting at home right now going, calculating stuff in formulary sounds like fun, so like.
Yeah.
So like a Paul Krausar, right? And a John Wittek. I mean, these are guys, I should tell everybody, I've known them both.
Yep, they're good
Krausar all
guys.
my life, and John probably 25 years. If that's the kind of thing that you find enjoyable and you like helping people, I'm sure you guys could use some more volunteers yet, couldn't you?
We can. We are approved for 7 volunteers, which at the end of this, 7 counseling volunteers, because you can volunteer in other ways too. For this coming open enrollment, we should have our full complement. But things change all the time. I know one of the volunteers that's coming in is actually from the Quad Cities, and so she'll want to go to the Quad Cities when there's an opening up there. SHIIP only allows you as many counselors as what your traffic indicates that you need. So Quad City area was full, so she's going to volunteer down here until something opens up there. But through open enrollment, she'll be there. So we'll have 7 this year, which helps. The more volunteers we have, the less strain there is on the volunteers that are there. So we're always looking for new volunteers, hoping that they'll come in. Right now, what happens with the volunteers is that a background check is completed on them. They cannot be affiliated with any insurance program at all.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
You don't get to sell insurance and advise people for SHIIP. It's not a thing.
Right. That doesn't work. So, they'll go through an interview process, and then there's training. There's like 6 weeks of online training, not 8 hours a day. It's,
right.
Over a 6-week period, you have online training. Then they're mentored in the host site, and then they are certified as volunteers. On our site, our volunteers set their own schedules. When a client calls in, they call into a number at Senior Resources, and Senior Resources puts them through to our voicemail. I pick up those voicemails, and I assign them to people to the volunteers that are there. And so the volunteer then calls the client and sets their own appointment time. So if you're a volunteer and you decide you only want to be there during open enrollment 3 days a week, you can make that work. You can make that happen. Through the summer, I didn't go in at all last week, and today is my SHIIP day, so I've got appointments all day. So I'm setting my own schedule, which I think in our case people really like.
I would think, and that's one thing about being a volunteer, is it's always easier to be a volunteer when you can do it on your terms,
right?
And that the organization understands that,
right.
You know what I mean, and they kind of build the organization around volunteer satisfaction and volunteer happiness, because that's what keeps people doing it, right?
Exactly.
So that's awesome. If you're over 65, if you're approaching retirement, if you have Medicare on the radar in any way, shape, or form, you guys are a resource.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's
definitely.
Functionally that simple. If you are over 65, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call.
Right, or
or
if you just
drop an
want,
email,
even if you're not planning on retiring,
Yeah.
because you don't have to take Medicare as long as you're covered by an
Right.
employer's insurance plan. But even if you're just curious and you're thinking about retirement, and hey, what's this going to do? Come in and talk to us.
Yep.
You don't have to be ready to start
Yep.
on Medicare if you're just wanting to gather information.
And that was what my mom did. She was retiring, and she's not 65 yet. Oh, she's going to shoot me. I should know how old my mom is.
You should.
I was trying to remember if it was just. Either way, I know she waited to retire until she got closer, because obviously, you
That's
might as well,
expensive, yeah.
right? Yeah. And so I don't remember. Yeah, she must have been. But she started planning early. I mean, she retired in April, I think it was. And, she was December, January, she started having these conversations. How am I going to handle, and down to the point of okay, well, when does this one actually end? If I retire working with the county, right? If I retire on this day, when does my health insurance end?
Yep.
What's my window?
Right.
Because there's a lot of timelines and deadlines, and if you don't do it in those times,
You can face some problems.
you've got a challenge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I know John was a tremendous help for her, and yes, I have her permission. People, John, it's okay. She said it was okay to mention it. So, yeah, call, reach out. Senior Resources.
Senior Resources.
I was just going to say, so let's take a half a step back. If you're in that age bracket, Senior Resources as a whole is a huge resource.
Yes, it is.
And, if you just call out to Senior Resources, make that first phone call, the first step's always the hardest, right?
Yep.
You're going to find a bunch of people that work with Megan Francis, who you see on the show all the time. You're going to see a bunch of great people doing a bunch of great stuff, and have connections with pretty much anything you're going to have questions on,
Right,
of which
exactly.
SHIIP is one of those big tools.
Right.
So,
Yep. They are our sponsor, you know, they provide us the office space
Yep.
and the paper and things
Yeah.
like that, so.
Well, Kim, thank you for stopping
Yes,
in. It's
thanks for
always a
having me.
pleasure. Thank you for letting me ruminate a little bit about the definitions of insurance. But
Sure.
you know, it's a fun thing to think about in a weird way, right? Like you've got to really think about what it is that you want and need and what makes you
Yeah.
comfortable and happy.
Yeah.
So
And as a volunteer, I think the more you're exposed to people, the more you understand how to read them and what it is that's the most important to them,
Yeah.
so you can give them more information there.
yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for what you do. I know the community appreciates it. Thank you to all the other volunteers. I don't know the others, so I know half of you guys.
Kay Temple
Oh yeah,
and Marianne Haas.
that name doesn't sound familiar.
She worked at the library.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yep. So thank you to all of you. The community appreciates it and appreciates what you do.
Thank you.
And I know a bunch of seniors too. So
Okay.
on that note, seniors and anybody who's within striking distance of a senior in your life or family, watch Dr. Saga tonight. Go back and watch your Dr. Saga dementia series on our website, on the channel, is somewhere, because it's Alzheimer's Awareness Month. It's the time to be thinking about it. Keep it on front and center in your mind. Learn how to recognize the warning signs so that if it's you or somebody you love, you know what to do. But that'll start at 5:30 tonight, and he's usually right on the dot. So be ready at 5:30. We'll see you then.